So while Quebecers may not want a federal election, the Premier of Quebec sure seems to. Today, Quebec Premier François Legault put pressure on the Bloc Québécois to vote against the Liberals in next week's non-confidence vote. And while Bloc leader Yves-François Blanchet will be voting against the Conservative motion, he left the door open for future votes.
Now we'll start by showing that the attempt by the Conservatives was stupid. And after this is done and voted, I might come with something more precise.
Now, the Bloc won't be the only party voting against the Conservative motion next week. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says his party will vote against the motion, prompting a fresh round of attacks from the Conservatives.
We're not going to let Pierre Poilievre tell us what to do. We're not going to listen to someone who wants to cut the things that people need.
Jagmeet Singh is a fake, a phony, a fraud, and a liar.
I'm joined now by Radio-Canada's Parliamentary Bureau Chief, Blouin, and the CBC's Chief Political Correspondent, Rosemary Barton. Okay, lots of moving parts today, so I'm counting on you to help us make some sense of it. Louis, let's start with Pablo Rodriguez. He's out of cabinet, he's sitting as an independent, he's going to quit his seat in January to seek the provincial Quebec leadership. What do you make of this move? Why is he doing it this way?
I think he wants to remain neutral, not having like a feet in provincial politics, not having a feet in federal politics at the same time. Help Trudeau, because there could be a cross-contamination here of the files between Ottawa and Quebec. So he's trying to be in the back of the House of Commons, not be seeing too much, and trying to remain discreet. But what he's doing is trying to prevent a by-election before the general election. But today it was interesting to hear him taking his distances from the Prime Minister, not denying, the legacy of this government. But he knows that this is going to be a problem for him moving forward in this PLQ race on immigration, on linguistic issues, and already some of his adversaries in Quebec City are trying to say that he's kind of a local branch of the Liberal Party of Canada coming into Quebec. So we have to try and affirm kind of his independence.
Okay, Rosie, how do you see it?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, I think that the by-election issue is key, and that was probably something that came at the request, frankly, of the Prime Minister's office, given that we've known Mr. Rodriguez is going to make this move for many, many weeks. It was just, he was also told to wait until after the by-election from Monday. So you can't call a by-election within 9 months of a general, so that avoids this situation. Deciding to sit as independent, politically makes sense, as Louis said, for all of those reasons. It could be viewed as a bit of a slap in the face, though, frankly, to Justin Trudeau and his colleagues. And he has been in politics for decades. He's been a federal Liberal for a very long time. He only lost once, I believe, during the Orange Wave. So, he's walking the delicate balance here of trying not to piss off the people that he's going to have to sit with for the next number of months, and trying to establish himself as someone ready to defend Quebec's interests. I think that's going to be hard. He has a long track record. Yes, he was a Quebec lieutenant, but he was associated with this government, which, as Louis points out, hasn't always done everything to make Quebec happy.
I'm curious to see how much we'll actually see him in the House of Commons.
Sure.
Because he's seeking another job, so, we'll see. So his replacement, Louis, not in his cabinet post, but in his political post as Quebec lieutenant, is Jean-Yves Duclos, who is the procurement minister, a Quebec City MP. What do you make of this move? What has Mr. Duclos had added to his plate today?
Let's say that he had quite a first day with Premier Legault coming out and saying that the Bloc should vote against the government next week. But Mr. Duclos is seen as a very calm, very disciplined, organized person. He's also an MP from Quebec City. There's two in the region of Quebec City. So he's a close interlocutor to Gouvernement Legault, and he's seen as a disciplined person who doesn't make mistakes. So he's going to stay focused on message. Let's say that he's not the fighter that Pablo Rodriguez is publicly. The image is as the way he's expressing himself, but he's disciplined. And Justin Trudeau right now doesn't need any mistakes with the Legault government, especially after what happened today. And Mr. Duclos was able to respond today, saying, reminding Quebecers especially that Mr. Legault did that in the past, saying the voters how they should vote to support Mr. O'Toole last election. That didn't go very well after that, so he pointed that out today. So he started. It was, let's say, baptism by fire today for Mr. Duclos.
Right. So Rosie, I think that's a pretty good assessment of Jean-Yves Duclos. He's very polite and friendly and calm. calm and you know, a guy who's methodical in how he approaches things. But what do you make of what the Premier of Quebec did today? You know, trying to intervene in the confidence vote next week and sort of daring Mr. Blanchet or pushing Mr. Blanchet to bring this government down. Yeah,
I mean, François Legault, more than anything right now, needs an enemy. That's what could probably help him with his own popularity, which is just as bad as Justin Trudeau's, maybe worse. Things are not looking good for him. And generally, Quebec premiers fare best when they have sort of overt people to fight against in Ottawa. That's why that immigration, migrant issue keeps coming up, certainly for Quebec. But it's also why he tried to push anyone to force an election here. It didn't go over very well. Certainly, Mr. Blanchet is not taking orders from François Legault, and he's certainly not going to use his relationship with the leader of the PQ, who's doing very well, to try and make that happen. I think Mr. Duclos is all the things that Louis said, and I think the other part of it is they don't necessarily need the best Quebec organizer in Monsieur Duclos, because they've got some other people doing that. Soraya Fernandez, Mélanie Joly, we know to be an excellent Quebec organizer, François-Philippe Champagne. So they need someone who understands Quebec politics and can understand when and how to respond, which is what we saw today. Okay, but you know, Louis, the Premier interjected trying to get Mr. Blanchet to vote with Mr. Poilievre next week. He said no, but he did, to use my rudimentary French, ouvre la porte to doing it in the future, maybe bringing his own motion. I watched a lot of Sesame Street as a kid. You know, I mean, what do you think the Bloc will do here? I mean, they're not going to give Poilievre what he wants next week, but they want this boost to the OAS, which is expensive. And he suggested maybe October. Let's see where we go. What do you think they're going to do at the BQ?
I think, well, in question period, they were negotiating in public earlier. The leader of the Bloc Québécois in the Commons said, you know, are they going to support this pension boost that we're asking for, yes or no? So there's the public conversation going on, but there's also the behind the doors conversations going on. And I think, and Mr. Blanchet is being very open about it, very coherent about it, I have to say, saying, listen, we need some time to negotiate seriously, see what they can give us. We are very clear publicly and behind closed door of what we want. Now the ball is in their court. So he has the good game here, Mr. Blanchet. But it's going to become with what the government Legault did today, what Premier Legault did today. It's putting more pressure on him, though. Will he be able to remain in this negotiation for a long time? Could he keep supporting the government for a long time? It's more pressure on him for sure. I think if we come mid-October or something like that, Mr. Blanchet is already talking about that time frame. Things could get more complicated. So we'll see where it goes. The NDP maybe could save the government at that point, but Mr. Blanchet says, okay, let's try to get something very concrete to put to the electorate in the next election. If we can get it, well, let's go then.
Yeah, you know, the NDP today too, Rosie, we were promised a video that we never got, but we did get Jagmeet Singh live and in person and taking questions, saying, I'm not going to do what Pierre Poilievre wants. I'm not going to give Pierre Poilievre what he wants. I don't take his orders for him. He's also going to vote against that confidence motion next week. What do you think the NDP does now? Yeah, I mean, I think that's the only position for them to take, because they cannot look beholden to Pierre Poilievre. Remember, he came out a week before Jagmeet Singh ripped up the deal, telling him to do that. The optics of that were a little bit difficult for Mr. Singh, so he can't be seen to be doing that again. And most importantly, he doesn't want an election right now. We all know that to be the case. So things will eventually, you know, when we get to the point where everyone is upset, they will agree finally to bring down the government. And it won't really matter who's instigated it or what the motion is, frankly, once we get to that point. But we are far from it. I think what we saw from Mr. Blanchet is really a newfound confidence from the Bloc and from the Bloc leader, who believes that he has a certain amount of leverage that he didn't have before and wants to see what he can get from the government. I don't think that means he's going to get everything he wants, to your point, because it's very expensive. But could he get the promise of a timeline of delivery? Could he get the promise that there's something in the budget, or that there's a first step before the budget? Maybe. You know, the government here has to do everything it can to buy itself more time, and it's going to negotiate with anyone who wants to come to the table with an idea. Okay, so with Pablo Rodriguez's departure, not just from caucus, but from cabinet, Louis, we didn't see anyone elevated. We didn't see a new MP join the front benches of the government. We saw Anita Anand add a second portfolio. My conversation suggests to me that we should see that as a holding pattern until a larger shuffle later this fall. They've started conversations with cabinet ministers saying, what are your intentions about running? And next month, around the U.S. election, who knows, we're going to see probably a bigger cabinet shuffle as they get ready for the election. Is that how you see it? Is that what you're hearing? What are your thoughts on it?
I thought they tried it last year. I mean, it would have to be
didn't
quite
work
a
too well.
shake-up to make a difference, so we'll see. It could happen. Maybe they can try to shuffle things around another time. But at the same time, do they really have, if they try to do this reset another time, and we saw the result last year, and if some MPs get even more angry because they didn't get their chance to get in caucus in the cabinet again, that could cause more problem. I think they need unity. So they would have maybe to have a major thing going on, or like a major shuffle to put strategic people in different places, or organize portfolios maybe, or looking forward to the next election to be coherent with the message. But at this point, I don't know what will make it work, because we've seen in the last year and a half, nothing is moving.
Yeah, Rosie, I don't know if it would be sort of a strategic shuffle so much as there are more Seamus O'Regans and more Pablo Rodriguez's out there in cabinet just aren't going to run again. Like, do we expect Lawrence Macaulay to run again, for example, and they might make some bigger changes? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually think they want to probably avoid a shuffle. Not to dispute what you're saying, but I think because of what Louis said, that it was not successful last time, that if there's a way to avoid it, they might consider that. So that could mean if you know that someone's not going to run, you just let them ride it out,
right,
and you figure it out going forward. I think part of that explanation came from what Anita Anand said today. She was asked multiple times about her own leadership ambition. She could not have been more programmed on talking points about unity and team, and I'm not here for that. So if you've got someone who was interested in this job, and probably still is, but isn't saying it, talking like that, something's getting through to people here about how they need to behave, at least publicly, going forward.
Well, if Anita Anand had said at the small shuffle today, yeah, I want the Prime Minister's job, there'd be another shuffle tomorrow. All right, Louis Blouin, Rosemary Barton, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
The Conservative Party's initial plan, at least, to force an early election appears to be dead on arrival. Today, both the Bloc Québécois and NDP confirmed they will not support next week's non-confidence motion against the Trudeau government.
I go against the Conservatives on a vote that is only about Pierre Poilievre and his huge ambition for himself.
We're not going to let Pierre Poilievre tell us what to do. We're not going to listen to someone who wants to cut the things that people need. Right now, Canadians need relief, not more cuts. We've got people's back.
So here's how Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre responded.
Jagmeet Singh is a fake, a phony, a fraud, and a liar. And the people of Canada cannot trust anything that he says. It's time for the Bloc and the NDP to stop boosting carbon taxes and protecting this costly Prime Minister, and allow Canadians to vote in a carbon tax election.
All right, we're going to talk about all of this with the Power Panel. Emily Nicola is a columnist for Le Devoir. Amanda Alvaro is a former Liberal Party communication strategist. Andrew Thompson is a former Saskatchewan NDP cabinet minister. And here with me in the studio, Tim Powers is a former strategist for Conservative parties. Tim, this Jagmeet Singh guy sounds like a bad guy. Jagmeet Singh is the leader of the NDP, because that's how it's pronounced. What did you make of this response from the Conservatives? Call him a fake, a phony, a fraud, and a liar because they won't give Pierre Poilievre the election he wants so bad.
Well, this is getting so personal. I don't know who it necessarily benefits, because Mr. Singh, when I heard him respond to media, didn't seem too happy either. But maybe that is the point, to cause Mr. Singh to be irritated, hoping he makes mistakes, and whatever opportunity he has or thinks he has may be diminished because of those mistakes. But the Conservatives believe if they can neutralize Mr. Singh and put him in a box whereby it appears that he is still in league with the NDP, or with the Liberals, right, that there's political opportunity for him there. And as we've seen, nobody's sparing any punches. I don't know how tolerable that will be for the Canadian electorate, but they've seemed to let it go so far.
Andrew, they keep calling Jagmeet Singh, Jagmeet, but also a sellout, saying that he's only voting against her confidence motions so he can qualify for his pension, which vests, I believe, in February. If you do the math and do the calendar, if he was really motivated by his pension, he never would have torn up supplying confidence agreement, because that would have taken him to June. It's the decision to do this that puts that at risk and given them this attack. I mean, do you think anyone will side with the Conservatives in this sort of environment in their efforts to bring down the Liberals? Oh. We're not hearing Andrew there. I don't know. That's us. Hang out. We got you. Try it now.
What about now?
There you go. There you go. We got to make the audience wait. Here we go.
Now that the pressure's on, right? So, no, I don't think there's a lot of public support for an election right now. I mean, we're certainly not seeing it in the polls. And frankly, Pierre Poilievre's not really putting forward much of an argument for it, other than this being a referendum on the carbon tax. He's not laid out any other kind of compelling reasons to be able to motivate for him going into government, other than the fact he's obviously salivating, waiting for a chance to become Prime Minister. I do think it's a bit childish that he's pulling this kind of J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, mispronunciation of names piece. It's very, kind of just bad theatrics, cheap politics, and he knows better than that. But the public, I think, is looking at this and going, they're not clamoring for a Pierre Poilievre government. The NDP certainly don't want to do anything that looks like they're helping the Tories get into power. And I think everyone's waiting for the Liberals to actually see what they do next in terms of their own leadership issues before anything changes in the political channel.
Amanda, what are your thoughts on where things are?
Well, David, I'm going to say something that I haven't said in a long time. And I think that the Liberals won today. I think that this was their day.
Wow.
And right? I haven't said it in a while, but I really do. And I think that this is an interesting dynamic that's forming. I mean, this was a bad day for Poilievre because he wasn't able to succeed in his ambition to drive Canadians to the polls at the earliest possible date for his own political gain. This was a bad day for Singh and the NDP because this really looks to a lot of people who are on looking in, and it kind of looks like this idea that they're still propping up the Liberals despite his desire to make a different case. Mm-hmm. So I think for the Liberals, this allows, and sorry, I'll say one thing about the NDP. It's not surprising, though. I mean, this would be a terrible time, obviously, for them to go to the polls. They're still way down at 16%. They still have a lot of fundraising to do. They have a number of provincial elections that are underway, so all of their resources are really stretched. So I don't think anyone was actually expecting that. And he telegraphed this a little bit as well. He said early on when he was pulling away from the agreement that he would take it at a case-by-case basis, but it really makes him an obvious target for Poilievre. So It ends up being a bad day for him.
Emily, how do you see it? A good day for the Liberals and a day where they lost their Quebec lieutenant and a cabinet minister after losing a seat? I mean, I know we're going to talk about that after the break, but I guess on a relative scale, I mean, how do you see what happened in Ottawa?
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about that right now. I'm going to keep it for after the break. Yep. But I will say that the people who are having the best day are actually the Bloc Québécois. Yeah. First of all, they're having the best week. They won a seat in Montreal. And they have been locked out of any sort of actual power play for the duration of this minority government because of the Liberal NDP agreement. And that means that they've been staying above the fray. And that has helped to them to present themselves this week as, quote unquote, the adult in the room. And I'm quoting Yves-François Blanchet, and kind of stay out of the insults. The only kind of insults that Pierre Poilievre has been using so far is essentially trying to associate them with the Liberal Party, which doesn't work in the mind of Quebecers. And so there's nothing that sticks, essentially, so far with the Bloc Québécois. So they're having the wildest time of their life. And one of the things that they could be doing, actually, which would be very interesting and almost funny, would be to trigger a non-confidence vote with language that is for Quebec that the Conservative Party could not agree with. If they were to do that, they would put a stop to everything that Pierre Poilievre is doing, which is basically trying to call everyone else chicken. And it will be basically a wild card that nobody else in Parliament knows how to respond to. So I hope that they do something of the sort so that people can actually go back to, I don't know, like voting bills or something.
David, can I just pick up on something? I don't want to rain on Amanda's parade. First of all, I do think for Mr. Blanchet, it's happy hour till he decides to close the bar.
He came in here and did an interview. He was so excited.
Yeah, listen, he's going to have everything he can at 2-for-1 prices until it gets closed down. But the challenge for, I think, for the Liberals, they may feel like it's a good day, and Lord knows, Amanda's right. They need that for their own motivational purposes. But I wouldn't say it's necessarily a bad day for Mr. Poilievre, because remember, one of the criticisms of previous Conservative leaders, Mr. O'Toole and even Mr. Scheer to a degree, was they kind of softened up, they didn't let down, they didn't hard charge on everything. Mr. Poilievre, the people who want an election, the people who have already rendered a verdict on Mr. Trudeau, are not going to be upset to see him behaving as he did.
Yeah.
Where there's vulnerability, and where Amanda may be right, is there, you know, if Pierre Poilievre does need voters outside the 43% I think we had him in the Abacus poll at, then they may not be as happy. But right now, I think he thinks, one, he has to keep the people who are supporting him happy by just banging on the door constantly and being strongly aggressive. And two, he's got more latitude to make mistakes now as opposed to during the election campaign. So he's going to push the envelope, I think.
Yeah, but let's remember that there's a huge amount of that Poilievre vote, that vote that's parked with the Conservatives, that 43%, you know, Tim, that you're talking about, that's there only because they dislike Justin Trudeau. And that's really what people are waiting to see, is what plays out with the Liberals. Right now, Trudeau's kind of whistling past the graveyard. He's doing his own kind of, you know, schmaltzy, well, I'm going to stay until I don't stay kind of thing. And I think people are really waiting to see whether the Liberals are, in fact, going to change the leader or not. If they don't, then that vote may firm up with Poilievre. Some of that could very well split, though, back off to the NDP, which is presenting itself as a non-angry, well, or less angry, almost equally as angry opposition party.
They're happy and angry
to the Liberals. But I mean, that's the, you know, I think that that's what's still all in play. And I think there's a lot of voters out there that are really watching to see what comes in the next couple of weeks.
But you know, Amanda, it seems like I was watching Question Period today, and in French, Mr. Poilievre tried to ask questions of Mr. Blanchet, and then he tried to ask questions of Jagmeet Singh, and that was not how Question Period works. And I know most people may not care, but it led to this like shutdown of Question Period, and the government didn't answer, and the speaker just moved on to the next guy, and then he went outside and did a scrum and repeated the fraud and phony thing, but added liar, which you can't say inside the House. If every day is give me the election I want, you lying frauds, what kind of an effect does that have over time? Because that's all we've kind of heard since Parliament came back.
Well, at some point, sorry, I just kicked my own camera. At some point, I think that, you know, I think that Canadians, I hope that Canadians will feel en masse the way that many do feel. And that's that his really toxic and ugly rhetoric, I mean, we're a week in and already it's like you want to turn the volume down on him. It's just the nastiness that he brings into the House and then takes out of the House because his desire for a soundbite is bigger than his desire to do the right thing or to do a good thing on behalf of Canadians. I do think that the American election could potentially have the opportunity to have Poilievre's strategy backfire on him. I think people are have more of an openness to a more optimistic view of the country versus this broken message that he likes to deliver over and over again. So I think he's, he has a lot of runway right now, but he could get to the end of it where people are just fed up with listening to the ugliness that he continues to spew.
Right. There's an appetite probably for positive politics, but it's got to have a credible message from a credible messenger. And that's going to be the challenge that everybody who's sort of positioning opposite Poilievre is struggling to find. Emily, how do you see all of this sort of like Ottawa bubble toxicity and online toxicity, which is they're kind of feeding each other? How do you see it outside of this Ottawa sort of political bubble playing out?
Yeah, I will agree with Amanda that outside of that political bubble, a lot of people are watching American politics. We're now at 2 assassination attempts for Donald Trump. We don't know in what shape or form our American neighbors will end up in November for the presidential, the vote. And I think a lot can shift in that time. For Canadians and the Canadian mood, the Canadian political mood, depending on what happens in the U.S. There is a point at which political theater stops to be seen as a game, and when people realize that rhetorical civil war isn't that fun, and it leads to actual consequences. And I pray to God that we're not going to reach that day. It's even more volatile in the US, and so it's more likely that we're going to see something there before we see it in Canada. But I just want us to realize that even if an election was called, if that is the level of language and how people are going to be fundraising, calling on their supporters, the level of threat, security threat to anybody campaigning, when that is the tone coming back to the House of Commons this week, I'm worried about the security of people who will be running for office if that is something that we normalize this week.
Yeah, we've got a couple MPs coming up a little bit later in the show. We're going to talk about the need for enhanced security because of that confrontation, Tim, we saw with Pierre Poilievre, with Jagmeet Singh the other day, which he blamed on Pierre Poilievre. This is the type of Canada Pierre Poilievre wants, and obviously the Conservatives are pushing back on that. But, you know, this is where it has gone. I'm old enough to remember when covering politics was a bit of fun. A lot of that's gone now. Like, there's no back and forth humor anymore. It's just all attack and rage and insult and character assassination. That's not good for a society.
Well, in my mind, I'm slightly younger than you. In fact, I'm not. I also remember that era
many years
too.
older.
But you know what? Emily makes a really interesting point. We have with us, of course, the silver medal winning coach of Canada's women's rugby team. I'm saying that because he's here.
He's off stage watching.
He's off stage. But no, I say that because in sport, and all of us who have kids in sport are really familiar with this now, they have done a lot to bring in rules about how you talk to people, not just how coaches talk to athletes, but how you talk to referees. Everywhere else in society, except in the political arena, there's a lot of regulatory measures that are changing behavior. And I do wonder, on Emily's point, building off of Amanda's, you know, does that we live in every other aspect of our life, does it start to inform what we demand from politicians? There's still this equilibrium that I think favors Poilievre at the moment because there still is this anger and frustration out there. His trick and ultimate success or failure will be, when does he turn that? Because I think there is this desire to have a better dialogue than a worse dialogue.
Two things. That was Tim's way of letting everyone know he's involved with rugby, and he knows a very successful coach who won an Olympic silver medal. And
that's not being polite.
And boy, they never had those rules when you and me were playing rugby back in St. John's. But Andrew, like on this point, like we did see this confrontation with Mr. Singh, and you know people are kind of giving him grief for turning around and going back to the guy and you know getting up in his face. Jagmeet Singh has put up with a lot of that since he's been elected, and at a certain point, what do you expect a guy to do, I think, is kind of how I look at it. You're going to have your moments. But on this constant aggression and denigration that we're seeing now, and sort of these rising sort of security concerns, I mean, we're 1 week back here, and it's that bad.
Well, I mean, these guys, look, they're part of that, you know, convoy clown crowd that was out there. They've been there pretty much since the convoy. Haven't moved, and I think until we see what happens with the Litch and Barber trials, that maybe that helps tone down some of those right wingers that realize that look, you can't just be constantly in people's face and making wild threats. On my feed, I can tell you, when I was looking this week, certainly wasn't full of anybody complaining at all about what Singh did. What I was seeing is a lot of people going, yeah, this is about time. It's about time more politicians did that, rather than what MP Cooper did, which is go out and mollycoddle these people to try to win their favor. And so, I think, though, Emily is ultimately right on this, in that people will tire of this. I mean, the objective of what Poilievre's trying to do is not only enrage and motivate his supporters, but demoralize, Liberal and NDP supporters, and trying to make it difficult for them to stand up for the causes they believe in. I think to a certain extent, Singh's taken the bait on that. I don't know that that's ultimately going to work for him. He says on the one side he wants to be, more like Layton's message about, hope and optimism. On the other hand, we get a lot of anger back out of it. He's got to figure out how to moderate that tone and which one of those two he wants to proceed with if he's going to be, I think, successful. But my sense is Emily's right that in the longer term, this anger just doesn't work.
Okay, we got to take a quick break. I do have to say that Michael Cooper did issue a statement saying that he was just in that restaurant getting something to eat. They recognized him, asked for a picture. He wasn't there with them. So there you go. That's the Conservative response on that. But up next.